Heavy rain building up across western parts of Scotland in particular. Drier further south, there are a few spots of rain and staying pretty cloudy. Further rain to come then as we go through Christmas Eve and Christmas Day itself, and it is going to be windy at times too. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Dewbs & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
to find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Hello there, 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry. Coming up tonight, we'll have the very latest on that horrendous situation in Prague, which has seen at least 15 people die due to a shooting. Students barricading themselves in classrooms in a massive police operation. Also today, I want to debate the fact that a judge has ruled that the 2 teenage killers of Brianna Ghey will be named. Do you agree with that decision? Should there ever be a case where a criminal has anonymity? And of course, the junior doctors are still on strike, and are you still supporting them? And get this right, the police will be able to run facial recognition searches on a database containing images of Britain's 50 million driving licence holders. This is all under a new law that's been quietly shuffled in. Do you support that? Are you of the camp where if you've got nothing to hide, don't worry about it? Or do you sit there and think, hang on just a second, that is my privacy that we are talking about? And Bradford University is set to introduce scholarships for white working class males. Good, that's what I say. It's about time some positive attention finally went to that group. Do you agree? Well, we're going to be getting stuck into all of that. But before we do, let's cross live for tonight's latest headlines.
Michelle, thank you. Good evening. I'm Sam Francis. The headlines at 6. Emergency services in Prague say more than 14 people have been killed in a mass shooting at a university. Dozens more are wounded. The gunman's body has also been found in the area. Czech police are reporting the suspect's father was also found dead earlier today. Officers responded to reports of a shooter at around 2 o'clock UK time this afternoon. We understand he opened fire from a roof in downtown Prague. Reports say that the shooter was a student at the Faculty of Arts at Charles University, and we understand that the shooting is not currently being treated as a terrorist attack. Here in the UK, a murder investigation has been launched after a 4-year-old boy died following a knife attack in East London. The Metropolitan Police said they received a call just before 11 o'clock last night, raising concerns for the welfare of a child at a property in Hackney. The boy was found with knife injuries and was taken to hospital, where he later died. A 41-year-old woman has been arrested on suspicion of murder. An inquest into the death of the asylum seeker aboard the Bibi Stockholm barge has found that he died from compression of the neck caused by hanging. The Albanian asylum seeker was found unresponsive aboard the barge on the 12th of December. The coroner said there weren't thought to be any suspicious circumstances surrounding his death. A pre-inquest review is to be held on the 9th of July. The Labour leader says there's a real and constant threat to Europe from Russia. That's as he visits British troops in Estonia. Sir Keir Starmer has been watching training sessions on a NATO base bordering with Russia. He's there to show his commitment to the military alliance and has thanked servicemen and women for their courage, integrity, their loyalty and professionalism. Sir Keir warns that the West must not lose sight of Moscow's threat to Europe.
I'm here to say thank you to our troops here in Estonia who are based on the border pretty much with Russia for the work they're doing, keeping us safe, the work they're doing for NATO, but also to reaffirm our unshakable commitment for NATO and our unshakable commitment to Ukraine, and to remind everybody that Russia is a constant threat, not just now but into the future.
Keir Starmer in Estonia. There's more travel disruption to the Christmas getaway, with hundreds of passengers left stranded at Euston Station. That's as last-minute Eurostar strikes and cancelled trains are being blamed for mass disruption at one of the capital's busiest train stations. Our reporter Charlie Peters has more.
Significant travel chaos tonight out of London, tens of thousands of journeys interrupted. French staff striking on the Eurostar has meant that up to 25 services have been cancelled out of St Pancras International, and both at King's Cross and Euston, the West Coast Main Line and East Coast Main Line interrupted after trees fell on overhead lines due to winds caused by Storm Pia. The Met Office recording winds of up to 115 miles per hour earlier today.
Well, that weather is bringing more travel chaos to the Christmas plans of many people trying to get away for the holidays. It comes as one man has been taken to hospital after a tree fell onto his car in Derbyshire. British Airways flights have also been disrupted, and the National Rail is reporting that not only routes in Euston but across Scotland and parts of Wales are affected as well. A yellow weather warning is in place in Scotland until 9 o'clock this evening. It also covers Belfast, Newcastle and Manchester. This is GB News. We're across the UK on your TV, in your car, digital radio and on your smart speaker. Now, though, more from Michelle.
Thank you very much for that. I am Michelle Dewberry and I'm with you till 7. Just listening to those headlines there, I'm sitting thinking, have we ever had a year where we haven't had significant travel chaos when people are trying to get home for Christmas? Has there ever been a year? So get in touch and tell me when it is, and also why are we so bad at seemingly managing our traffic flow in this country? Get in touch and let me know. But I'll tell you who's keeping me company tonight till 7 o'clock. I've got the former editor of The Sun, Kelvin McKenzie, and the co-founder of the Together campaign, Alan Miller. Good evening to both of you.
Hi there.
You know the drill as well on this programme. It's not just about us. It's very much about you guys at home. What's on your mind tonight? Get in touch. All the usual ways. gbviews@gbnews.com. Or if Twitter is your thing, you can reach me there at GBNews. And speaking of Twitter, I've got a poll running. I want to ask you, do you think there's ever an event, an occasion, a reason why a convicted criminal should ever have anonymity? I'll be coming on to that story in just a second. Currently, 92% of you say no to that question, but get your thoughts on that Twitter poll coming in, and I'll have the results of that before the end of the programme. But for now, huge story over in Prague, a mass shooting. Let me cross live to Mark White to bring us up to speed with the very latest on this. Good evening to you, Mark. I mean, absolutely horrendous. Tell us what we know so far.
Yeah, horrific events, Michelle, that unfolded early afternoon in Prague, in the Old Town at Charles University, at the Faculty of Arts campus there, which overlooks the historic square. And a gunman, according to the police in Prague, who was himself a student at the Faculty of Arts, gained access to the building, went up to the 4th floor to a balcony overlooking the square and began opening fire. Now, at this moment, the police in Prague have confirmed that more than 15 people have been killed, 24 others have been wounded, some of those seriously injured. And the video that came out at the time, you're looking at the video there, showing actually some of the students, about a dozen of them, perching just on a ledge there by the balcony, trying to get away from the gunman who was just nearby, shooting from that balcony, putting themselves in a really precarious position, but clearly feeling that was the only option open to them to get their heads down in the hope that the gunman wouldn't see that they were there. Others were just running from the square, but of course this gunman had a high vantage point with a long-barreled weapon, looking down onto the square and just opening fire on people who were running. Lots of people, not just, of course, from Prague, but from all over the world, had gone to this historic city at this time of year. There was a couple there, newly married from the UK, were visiting Prague. They were in a cafe just opposite where the gunman was when a policeman came bursting in, shouting at them in Czech to stay down. The man, Thomas Lees, who was there with his new wife, had to shout to the officer, "I can't understand you." He then told them in English to get their heads down, that there was an active shooter, and that's what they did, stayed safe, and they are okay. And in fact, most of the students in the university did likewise. You know, it's a sad reflection of the time we're in, but because we've had so many mass shootings, especially in the United States, people kind of instinctively know that the best thing to do is shelter in place, barricade yourself into a room. And we saw images that came out from the university that showed students that had piled chairs and tables and anything else they could find up against the doors to try to stay safe. See one of the images there of a door in one of the classrooms that has been piled high with chairs and tables to try to keep this gunman out. Absolutely horrific.
And Mark, do we know the motive? Do we know what's caused this?
It seems at this early stage that it's a similar type motive to a lot of the school and university student shootings that we see in the US. A gunman, a 24-year-old man who had posted on social media in recent days about how much he hated the university, his fellow students, how much they hated him and how he wanted to carry out a mass shooting, and took his inspiration from a number of recent shootings, including one in Russia earlier this month. Now, what the police have revealed is that he was lived in a village about 13 miles from Prague, that at that house, at the family home, this gunman's father was found dead this morning, killed, we believe, by the gunman who then went on to carry out this rampage. There was a massive police manhunt for him, but clearly they didn't catch up with him in time before he carried out this rampage.
Thank you very much, Mark, for bringing us up to speed with that. What a devastating story. I mean, sometimes it just makes you wonder what on earth this world is coming to, doesn't it? What a senseless loss of life as well. So many people are so very young. You know, and I'll tell you about senseless waste of life, of course. You'll be familiar with the horrendous murder of Brianna Jai. Now, a judge ruled today that the two teenagers that were convicted of murdering Brianna can indeed be named when they are sentenced in February. Now, the people that conducted this crime, there were 15 when they did it, 16 now. Do you think it's the right decision by the judge, Kelvin, to remove their anonymity?
Yes, I must say I'm delighted and in some ways amazed that this has happened. And it just goes to show what a shocking murder this was. The truth about the matter is, I am often puzzled and amazed at why it is that the courts don't actually reveal the names of more of these teenagers. The idea that the kids of today are the same as when this law was brought in, which is around about the late 40s, early 50s, is ridiculous. They are often vile, they're often violent, and they are allowed then to wander around their neighbourhoods without anybody knowing anything about them. And I think that that should stop. I think that there should be an imperative within the court that if it's a serious enough crime, you get named as though you were an adult in a magistrate's court or a Crown Court.
At what stage?
Pretty early on, actually, depending on what
Whilst the trial is ongoing?
Yeah, when you are charged. When you are charged. If you're charged with ABH, GBH, or any of the other vile crimes which some of these youngsters are now charged with, right, they need to face, and the locals need to know what these people are that are wandering around. I mean, there are a lot of very violent crimes, and I think if you had police officers, I'd be very grateful if some of them would write in to explain what they have to put up with in regard to those crimes.
I'll come back to you on that in a sec, but Alan?
Well, we have a principle of innocent until proven guilty, so if you start charging people and then announcing their names...
but the adults are already.
The implication being that they've done the crime. So that's an important precedent. But the question about their age and about the revelation of their name, we need to decide in Britain at what point someone's an adult. If you can vote in Scotland at 16, if we're saying that you can only go to war at a certain age, you can go at 16, but you can only have a drink at 18. And if it is the case, as Kelvin's saying, that we think that people are adult...
I don't think you can go to war at 16, can you? I think you can join the junior leaders
and then you can go... Yeah, I mean, 17.
But anyway, go on.
But the point being, we can have that discussion. I think, in a way, young people are more immature sometimes, but I wouldn't make generalities about things. I think one of the problems with making decisions about rulings and what we should change in law with the most horrendous crimes, and this is a really, really disgusting, terrible, horrible crime, is that it doesn't tend to make for good law generally. If we have a principle that you have anonymity up until a certain age and you're a minor, which they were at 15, I haven't heard a conclusive argument as to why that would be of the public benefit to release their names in advance. But if we decide as a nation, you know, democratically, that what we think is that it should be much younger and people should be held responsible as adults younger, then we have to apply that to all things, not just this.
Well, the criminal age of responsibility in England and Wales, of course, is 10 years old, isn't it? What do you hope to gain then? What do you think is gained from the anonymity being lifted of these people?
Well, I think it's a crime. I think it's a crime which could be equated with any adult crime, right? I mean, this was, if you saw this as a Netflix crime drama, you would not believe that two 15-year-olds could actually dream up stabbing to death a perfectly innocent young person 28 times or whatever it was.
Yes.
So I am in favour of them being treated in exactly the same way as they would be if they were deemed to be adult. I am in favour of that law being changed for other crimes.
Would you be in
not just that
favour
one.
then of, like, for example, that so-called John Venables guy that's going through the parole system and all the rest of it, James Bulger's killers? Do you think he should? Because he's got, of course, a whole different identity. I think he's on about his second or third one or something. Do you think people like him?
I'm not in favour of them giving other identities. This is something which should carry with them for the rest of their lives. And nobody can argue with this particular crime that people shouldn't be able to... I don't know how long they're going to get. I suspect they're going to get something like 25 years or something like that. At the end of that time, I still want to know that it is that person that's walking down my high street.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, I don't mean to be... I don't know how long you're going to live, but there probably won't be you strolling down the high street.
You're suggesting I may not be around in 25 years' time.
In a word, yes. But no, my point is, though, that these people are going to be locked away for a very long time. And I'll tell you, the people that I feel sorry for in all of this, because these teenagers, right, in this prison, their fellow inmates are going to know. They're going to know that this is the guy that did this, this is the girl that did this. That is going to be out in that prison. So those guys, their life will be impacted, I would imagine. Those inmates will also know. The people that are innocent in this is their parents, so the killers' parents. All of a sudden, those innocent people, you know, the mums, the dads, siblings, whatever, everyone is now going to know it was your kid that did this, your child that did this. And there's a small part of me that feels a little bit sorry for those parents.
Well, again, I'm not sure entirely what the public interest is in changing this. I think there is an argument to be made that there are more violent, terrible, narcissistic, horrendous crimes. We certainly have seen them with knives and other things with young people. I think there are many reasons for that. And there are ways that we should approach that as a society. I think the glorification of violence, of nihilism, not believing in values and principles, perhaps things like military service or certainly doing things for the community, all things that could bestow values, which we've been really bad at doing, giving people a sense of being part of something, are all really important. However, there are always, no matter how strong a society is, people that do really horrendous things. The question is, for minors, do we want to change the rule for everyone as a consequence of it? I can't see the compelling evidence for it myself.
What are you calling a minor? Someone under the age of 18?
Well, 15, you know, someone who's under the age of 16.
And do you agree with the age of criminal responsibility then, in England, Wales being 10?
Well, they say that, but the thing is there's different levels. It's 10, but then there's 13, there's 15. They are treated differently depending on their actual age.
But do you think that level of 10, of like, that is the point where literally you as an individual, you can be held criminally responsible? Because people debate and dispute that.
I've always thought that was a strange thing. But I understand...
Strange?
Well, a 10-year-old... to be able to have moral reasoning about right and wrong. You know, many people when they're 10...
do.
When they're...
If you've got kids, you know.
When you're 10 years old...
You know, don't you? Your kids know right from wrong. Well, actually, they know it from about
also,
3.
One of the things is, it also depends what we're talking about. This is a really horrific, terrible thing. Let's take things like shoplifting or other things, right? Minor infractions that actually, when you're young, you might do something silly because your ability to make rational decisions, to be influenced, to do all sorts of things, they're still in the process of developing their minds, being brought up. To then hold them accountable in the same way that we'd hold an adult accountable, we don't do that in any other area, right? You don't say, oh, we can go out on a date with them. They can't make decisions like that.
Well, no, because that would be paedophilia and that would be illegal and that would be weird.
Exactly.
But they still know when they're 10. If you go to a shop, or if you're 9 or 8 or whatever, you go to a shop and you nick something, you know that is wrong, and you probably should have an appreciation of what the law is and isn't by that age. You tell me at home, what do you make to that anonymity? I've got a poll running on Twitter. Do you ever think that any convicted criminal should be able to remain anonymous? And if so, why? Get in touch and tell me. I can tell you, as of about 10 minutes ago, it was about 90% of you said no, criminals shouldn't ever be anonymous. Let's see if that will change, shall we, before the end of the programme. Coming up after the break, of course, the junior doctor strikes are ongoing. Do you still support them? Tell me, and I'll see you in 2.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, thank you for being a big part of GB News.
We'd like to wish you and your loved ones a Christmas season full of comfort and joy.
As well as a peaceful and prosperous new year.
From our family
to yours.
We are proud to be your channel.
Merry Christmas.
Happy Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Happy Christmas. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Here on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Merry Christmas.
Oh, that's nice, isn't it? Merry Christmas from all of us. I like that. Someone on Twitter says, Michelle, read children knowing what's right and wrong. I've got to say, I've never heard such nonsense like that's what is coming out of the mouth on the guy to your left. What planet is he on? Which left? My left, screen left, or what? You? This one?
No,
you need to let me know.
It's
what, him? Definitely him. But it is quite interesting, though, that whole conversation about when children are children, when they become adults, under what section applies to what. Someone else says on Twitter, naming these people doesn't really help anyone. We're talking, of course, about two teenagers that have just been told that they will have their anonymity lifted when they get sentenced in February. Naming these people doesn't really help anyone. They will basically just make life harder for prison staff, and it will just destroy the families of the killers. If they are a direct threat to the community on release, then it should be managed at that point. I think that's quite interesting. So what, you think that they should just be anonymous throughout their prison service, and then if and when they get released among us, then name them then? I mean, I don't mean to... I'm not sure how long they'd last in open society if they got named when they came out. Let me know your thoughts. Do you care about the protection of convicted criminals? Because we talked about Jamie Bulger's killers and saying whether or not they should get a different identity. Yeah. If they didn't, if John Venables was still John Venables and everyone knew who he was, I'm not sure he would last very long on the streets of Britain.
Would that be a sadness, would it?
Oh, I don't know. I couldn't possibly suggest anything like that. But, you know, I don't know. You can get in touch with me about that. I've got that poll running. No criminal, no matter how old, says Ian, should be allowed to remain anonymous. Their photographs should be published in every single newspaper. If Jackie says if children commit an adult crime, then absolutely yes, they should be named. Every criminal, no matter what age, should be named, says John. And I can tell you now, that is echoed pretty much throughout almost everyone that's getting in touch. Christine says, if you're old enough to kill someone, then you're old enough to be named. Simple as. Perhaps she would put no limits on it at all. I'm trying to fancy if there's anybody that would think something else. Is there anyone out there that thinks that they should be anonymous? Anyone? Are you out there? Do you think that these convicted killers should be anonymous? And if so, get in touch and tell me why, because I'd be fascinated to hear your reasoning on that one. But look, junior doctors, of course, are still on strike. Their second day. We know the drill by now, don't we? Ultimately, what they want is this pay restoration. I think it's back to 2008, which would be something like a 35% pay restoration. I've got to say, this standoff, Alan, it doesn't seem to be coming any further, really, to a resolution. Victoria Atkins, she's basically saying, if you call off this strike, I'll come around the table. The BMA are basically saying, well, we're not going to call off the strike until you give us a credible offer. There's all kinds of accusations being thrown around about whether or not people are taking the doctors' demands seriously, whether or not the doctors are being a little bit too over the top. Where are you on it?
Well, I think there's a few things. Firstly, this is not about saving the NHS. This is a question about pay and terms. The NHS is not a deity. It needs significant reorganisation, get rid of a lot of the fat at the top and its ideological problems. It needs efficiency. I think there's a lot of public sympathy for doctors and junior doctors to get more pay. My personal view is everyone should get more pay. We should get better pay across Britain. In the last 3 decades, we've been sluggish and inefficient. We should allow zombie companies to fail, and doctors should be paid better. However, that requires a plan, that requires organisation, it requires commitment, and it also requires management to be changed and efficiency. If you're a front key worker, you should be supporting that context. However, as well, the unions are often using this as an attempt to attack the government. So you've got these two things going on. There's a question of pay in and its own terms. And then it looks like in the election year coming up, you've got unions that are using this to kind of be very political. And that's a problem as well. And I think the public get weary of that. And frankly, both sides need to get together. We've now got over 7 million people waiting, still as a consequence of lockdown and COVID-only NHS. We've got, and the impacts to social care, which, by the way, none of these people supported their colleagues. When they talk about solidarity, very few of them supported when they challenged the vaccine mandate and all the social care workers that were lost and other peers, nurses and others that were challenged.
I remember it well.
And actually, it's got to be said, Matt Neal, who's one of the key leaders here, tried to, if he's into solidarity, try to have Dr. Asim Malhotra, one of the country's leading cardiologists, penalised by the GMC because he said that he was spreading misinformation. Now, surely the whole point about doctors and science is to have a wide discussion and to collaborate on that. So I'm very concerned that the actual issue of pay and conditions gets lost in a lot of the other arguments about save the NHS and about the question of the government, the Tories and the unions, and the public sector being very ideological.
Kelvin?
Well, the truth about the matter is that they are the highest paid members of the public sector. You start at around about 30-odd thousand, and you go up as a, quote, junior doctor, the most ridiculous expression I think I've ever heard, and you go up to kind of senior registrar to make about 100,000.
Yeah, they're not the most, what did you just say, the highest paid in the public sector?
Yeah, they are. Well, they are public sector workers. They are treated as such. They have their own pay unit which decides it. So what I find absolutely reprehensible is that, and I heard this argument put forward by somebody the other day, that in fact the whole point about trade unions is to inflict the biggest amount of pain in order to win the day. Now, that's all right. You run a train, and honestly, I commute all the time, and your train doesn't turn up. That's painful, right? When actually you are actually sentencing somebody with either cancer or some hip replacement or some issue to real pain, potentially death, certainly a problem about the pain will continue longer than if the dispute didn't last, I do have a problem. I would ban people in their position from going on strike. And I would say to them, if you don't like it, please all stop working for the NHS. One of the issues is they sign a thing which they're supposed to do no harm, right? Actually, they should sign something saying, I promise you I will do harm. This has been a shocking example, and most of the people involved in it, who are really leaders of it, are actually first-year students. Actually, where else would you start at 30,000 a year? Not many places. I actually do not drop one single tear for this lot, and I would actually clear them all out and say, go and do another job which doesn't involve trying to kill people rather than trying to save people's lives.
Well, I've got to say, I do probably, I have to say, I do dispute that these people are the highest paid public sector workers in this country. I'll dispute on that. But also, you know, if they're sitting here now, they would be saying, well, we don't feel that we're getting a fair pay deal. We don't want to kill anyone, to quote your expression. What we want to do is we want to be able to feel like we can remain in our employment and continue to save lives.
A friend of mine is a British Airways pilot.
Right.
He was telling me, he's about, I think about 55, 57 now. He was saying to me, he said, when I came into the game, he said a senior BOAC pilot would earn more than the Prime Minister kind of stuff. He said, we were right at the top. He said, we have gone down like that. That is what happens. In journalism, for instance, I would hire, say 35 years ago, I'd hire a junior reporter at 22,000 a year. Right? 30 years later, they are still being hired at 22,000 a year. And this is the reality, that things do change. I feel sorry these people feel bad about it. They should have thought about that before they became doctors.
Well, that's exactly the problem, though. We don't pay enough in Britain. We've got a sluggish economy. We need to improve it. But they will. Many have left the public sector.
Good.
And they've gone to the private sector. They've gone to other countries. We have a problem in Britain. Well, it's not good in the sense that...
No, I'm very pleased.
I'm all up for a discussion to have a more European-style health service. Like, if you look at Germany and France, they have private and they have some public provision. But we need to be able to work out ways of training our own citizens, as well as bringing good people in there, to recruit the best and the brightest, not have them just go. And we're the biggest employer with the NHS, and we spend so much money. It's inefficient. We should get it organised. It should be done diligently, not just people throw their hands up and just look at one component of it.
Yeah.
And you say it's good if these people leave.
Yeah,
and that's great.
I don't want these people. I do not want these people looking after my mum. I tell you that.
But if you suddenly drop down now and and have a heart attack, you won't think it's good if you get to a hospital.
If these people want, Michelle, if these people want more money, there's a simple solution, right? What they should do is they should go into the private sector. We should start having private hospitals. Once you work Once you work for a monopoly, and you have a trade union representing you, you are only part of a mass.
Right.
You are not an individual.
All right.
And I am in favour of individuals.
So I'm going to move in to Kelvin Island. So I'm on your island with you now, and I'm going along with your suggestions. And now all these people have quit the NHS, and now this NHS now is literally depleted of doctors.
They're not going to quit. These are great jobs.
Who then cares for the patients then, if everyone in your world has gone?
No,
and
they're not all going to quit. I'm inviting them to quit, and a percentage of them will go. Most of them will stay, and they enjoy their work and actually enjoy their pay. They have got a whole load of lefties have got involved now and actually are putting your parents, my parents, even me, to the sword.
Well, what do you make to it at home? You're very important to the conversation. You have the final say, and get in touch with me and tell me who do you agree with, or have you got a completely different view? gbviews@gbnews.com. I'll bring you into the conversation after the break. Right at the start of the programme, I got a message from Richard basically telling me to get off my high horse, Michelle. And he was talking, I wouldn't have minded, but at that point in the show, it was right, so I'd not even mounted the high horse yet. He was talking about my next story, because I'm asking you, do you think the police should be able to run facial recognition searches, basically, on your driver's licence database? Do you care or not? I'll see you in 2.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Hello everyone, I'm Michelle Dewberry, keeping you company till 7. The former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie, alongside me, and the co-founder of Together campaign, Alan Miller. Lots of you guys have been getting in touch. On that junior doctors conversation we've just been having, Nigel says, I stack shelves for Morrison's and I earn more than £14 an hour and I've not got any university debt. Doctors should not earn £14 an hour. It's disgraceful to expect them to do so. Matthew says, I wouldn't want to go through all of that training to be on £14 an hour. You'll remember, you'll be familiar with that poster when there was basically saying a barista in, I think it was Pret a Manger, and whatever it was, the £14. But I do have to caveat all of this because that £14, as I recall, that was just a basic pay. When you actually add in all of the extras, the overtimes, the night allowances and all the rest of it, they don't earn £14. So I do concede I would like them to earn more than what they currently do. Julia says, I will never support doctors or nurses striking at all. They should take their grievances out on the government, basically, and not out on the sick and the needy. They should be ashamed of themselves, says Julia. Really divided opinions. Annie says, I've never supported the junior doctors. They're in the wrong jobs if they think it's right. Basically, to leave the bedsides of the sick and the operating theatres, etc. Chrissy says, no, I think they've been cruel. 35% is too much to ask, she says. It is political. And I'll tell you what as well, we was just talking about anonymity with children and whether or not criminals should be named. I'll quickly tell you this before we move on. Glad says, we have 2 grandchildren, twins. She says they were very naughty, getting into trouble, stealing, etc. They got Asperger's at 12 years of age. Long story short, she says their names were in all the papers and all the media. She says, but it didn't do any good at all because basically it made all of their friends think they were great. Almost give them celebrity kind of status. Pam says, I worked in a school with children with problems. One child told me he happily helped his cousin break into property because he was small and he could get through the windows. When I asked him, don't you care about getting in trouble with the police? His answer was that because he was under 10, he knew that the police could never really do anything about it. Blimey, well, there you go. A clause in a new criminal justice bill could essentially give police the power to run facial recognition searches, get this, on 50 million driving licence holders. Now, this, I can tell you, right, splits opinion. Some will say this is a breach of privacy, others will say, so what? Where are you, Kelvin?
Well, I don't care. You know, the only people that are going to worry about this, apart from people who probably receive charity handouts in some way in order to progress their argument, are people who have some sort of crime which is going to be exposed thanks to the police managing to do something which is very difficult these days, which is actually to arrest somebody who has done something wrong and who doesn't wish to be found. So I'm delighted with this idea, and it will lead, I hope, to a lot of people who have done something wrong being charged and convicted. So, and I can't quite understand where the problem is if you haven't done anything wrong.
I'm sure Alan's about to tell you.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because of the Criminal Justice Bill, we see more and more legislation to have surveillance on all of us, which effectively says that we're all potential criminals, 50 million people, all surveyed consistently. There's a privacy question in a free society. We've also just been through the lockdowns, and for the last 3 years seen that there's been spies on citizens, on doctors, on journalists. We've had the DCMS and we've had the Rapid Response Unit. We've had all sorts of censorship and impositions, and we've seen that both with the state and with private companies. So we also see now that we have roads closed with low traffic neighbourhoods and low emission zones, and surveillance with cameras and others. So we have a situation broadly, and people going on protests and then ever-increasing rules and restrictions in a country where we should be upholding freedom more now than ever. If you look at some of the things that are happening around the world, our benefits of the Enlightenment of the last 300 years of the rights to free expression, to privacy, to protest, and yet it seems like the only response always is a blunt tool of more surveillance, more treating all citizens as though they've done something wrong. And the idea that no one's got anything to worry about if you haven't done anything wrong, it's just not, doesn't thrash out because of all the points I've just made. But the whole idea that you are constantly taking images from people on social media and elsewhere, I think it's egregious, it's very problematic, and it goes along the lines of digital ID being attempted to be brought in as well, which has often been argued against by the British population. We've seen it happen in Europe now. It's a problem, we shouldn't have it. If
someone stabbed your child to death, and I hope obviously it never happens, and the police had some kind of grainy CCTV image and, you know, public appeal, do you know this person absolutely failed, if there was an opportunity for them to run that image through a database, i.e. the driving licence database, and it led to an identification of your child's killer, would you still have your view, or would you just be pleased?
This is what happens, right? We do these things like the previous section, and you take one of the most horrendous things, and you ask if someone... The reason why we have juries is not because an individual will do an eye for an eye. If you ask me what I would think in a very particular circumstance, that's why you get juries who have not been affected by things.
No, I'm asking you, would you not want your killer, the child's killer, to be identified?
I understand what you're asking me, Michelle, but the point about having juries and others is that I might do all sorts...
But the person wouldn't get to the jury, Alan, if you couldn't identify them in the first place.
I might do all sorts of things in those circumstances. Would that be the morally right thing to do? Is that the legal, sensible thing for society?
No, you're missing my point. I'm not asking you what you would do to that person.
No. I know what you're asking me. You're asking, would I want to use the database to get... Would I want to use every means at my mechanism to do it? And as an individual, I'm sure I'd want to do everything I possibly could. Like, I might want to dispense with a jury in my own individual set of circumstances. I might want to just get that guy or woman or whoever have something terrible done to them. But that's why we have laws. That's why we're a civilised society. That's why we have protections for citizens. That's why we've got ideas of privacy, freedom of expression, and we don't allow constant surveillance. Or else we end up getting into a China situation where this facial technology actually has come from, where they're constantly monitoring their citizens, and we have a social credit type system.
So, I mean, you tell me at home, where would be your priority if you were victims of a horrendous crime? What would you prioritise the most? Privacy, an individual's privacy, don't store people's photos? Or would you like to see this kind of scenario where your CCTV imagery is ran among a database? I've got to say, the Home Office have said the following. Clause 21 of the Criminal Justice Bill does not allow for automatic access to DVLA records for facial recognition. Any further developments would be subject to further engagement, as the public would expect. What do you make to that? Let's talk, shall we, after the break, about working-class white males. Do you think we need to do more to support that group? I do. Tell me your thoughts.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock. Former editor of The Sun, Kelvin McKenzie, and co-founder of Together campaign, Alan Miller. We ended into that break with them disagreeing on whether or not this whole database of driving licences being checked with CCTV images was a good thing. They carried on the conversation in the break, and I think Alan even managed to convert you, didn't he, a little bit?
Well, I liked his argument that, in fact, nobody will no police officer will turn out for a burglary, but with the hate crime, they'll be there at 1,000 miles an hour. And I think Alan was concerned that instead of dealing with the laws that we have today, the answer always is let's widen it. And in this case, let's widen it to more video coverage.
Well, there you go. Conrad says the police need all the help available they can get you so you can have my image anytime you want it. He says, I've got absolutely nothing to hide. Sheila says, why would you object? ID, etc. is the way forward because, sadly, she says, we're no longer a civilised society. Alison says that this would be great if everyone has a driving licence, but they don't, so therefore that particular group perhaps would be treated unfairly. Richard, the guy that told me how to get off my high horse earlier on, he was saying the use of facial recognition for drivers is a good thing. He goes on to tell me a story about his son was done for speeding. He would never have believed his son was speeding, he said, until he saw the picture with his own eyes. So there you go. Anyway, look, at the start of the programme, I was asking you, do you think convicted criminals should ever have anonymity? I've got to say, that poll didn't really budge much over the last half an hour or so because 92.3% of you said a big fat no to that and 7.7% of you said yes. There you go. Right, the University of Bradford has announced a scholarship scheme now to help attract working-class white males. Apparently, that group only represents about 1.7% of students there. I've got to say, I thought it was quite good, actually, to see a positive initiative going on for white working-class men because that group of society seems to get blamed for so many of society's ills. Anyway, do you back this scheme?
Well, I think there's two questions. First of all, I'm surprised that there are even 1.7% white males in Bradford. Anybody who knows Bradford knows what the makeup of the students are in Bradford. It's a very Asian area, and as you might expect, with it being so expensive to house people, they're likely to want to stay at home, and therefore you're going to find that. Secondly, I always feel uneasy about trying to identify white, black, brown. Immediately you get an uneasy feeling that race is coming into it. I suspect this is just a PR exercise by a clapped-out university that is trying to actually gain some coverage in whether it's GB News or it's in the media coverage that it got this morning. I'm not in favour of it. And if white working class males want to go to university, they certainly have the opportunity to go to the universities as long as they choose the right subjects. I mean, one of the bigger issues in our country right now is that we've got too many people doing arts degrees and not enough people, except for foreign students, doing engineering, computers and things which will give them work when they come out of their degrees.
Well, there you go. By the way, 80% of Bradford residents, according to the last census, apparently were born in England. Alan?
Yeah, well, I think there's a number of issues with this. The first thing is it is true that white working-class boys and men have done significantly less well in a range of areas. I think we've got to take a step back and look at all of our issues of questions of integration, question of values, and education, and what is it for? What's the university for? Now, Tony Blair, in his esteemed wisdom, decided that we should have 50% of people going to university. What for? Firstly, the standard of university went down. Secondly, why does everyone or so many people have to go to university? And then if you haven't got a university degree, somehow you've got this problem. Actually, what we need is really good apprenticeships. We need builders, we need farmers, we need engineers, and we need people to go to university at good quality education. But I'm concerned about this idea that in America was called positive discrimination. When you start demarcating people around identity, we're increasingly separating people, we're encouraging them to identify based on pigmentation. In Britain, the great experiment that it is, we have done really well in many instances at bringing lots of people together under certain ideas. Now, we're failing increasingly at that, right? Because what we're doing is we're talking about difference, what separates us, identity, rather than the values that unite us, rather than principles around the really important values of what it means to be British. People get all embarrassed about what that means, the Enlightenment, commerce, all the things that were brought to the world in terms of rules, of law, brilliant things, and now we say it was all just rape and pillage and everything's terrible. And in that context, we should provide a situation where we have better education for everyone. That's at primary, secondary school and universities. And not that 50% have to go, but actually a section do. And then what we have is apprenticeships and others. Interestingly, right, now both men and women obviously work and they all go out, and families, if they are together, are less well off than 30 years ago when there was one breadwinner, right? So we have to resolve all these things. That's partly about the economy, that's partly about education, and so that's the context I'd look at this in.
Yeah, one of the things that I found fascinating as well is about the snobbery that surrounds the whole kind of manual jobs these days, the apprenticeships. I wonder why even is that still a thing? I've got to tell you, lots of people, surprisingly, you're getting in touch with me saying that you wouldn't even mind having ID cards in this day and age. I can tell you there's a whole conversation that we could have about that one. Perhaps we'll have that for another day. I can tell you now, Alan, I'm suggesting, I'm almost certain would be completely against that, so we'll perhaps get into that another night. But for now, Alan Miller, thank you very much for your company. Oh, yes. He's given me a card. He's given me a Christmas card as well. That's very, very rare.
I haven't got one. No,
I didn't get a Christmas card.
I tell you what, I've bribed the postman, or post person, and they haven't delivered your card to me either.
Did you notice he got politically correct there? I waited for the full hour. We got there in the end. He said post person. Oh, I never thought I'd see the day. I need to go for a lay down now. That's all I've got time for. Nigel Farage up next. Night.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, very good evening to you. I'm Alex Burkill here with your latest GB News weather forecast. Whilst there may be a bit of hill snow across northern parts through the next 24 hours or so, it's a milder story elsewhere. And we do still have some strong winds and some rain around, even though the deep area of low pressure we saw earlier today has now cleared away towards the east. So a blustery picture as we go through this evening and overnight. Some outbreaks of rain quite likely. Hill snow is an issue across some northern parts, particularly for Shetland. Here we could see something of an ice risk as we go through the night into Friday morning, and for many turning increasingly cloudy overnight, and with those blustery winds, temperatures not dropping much, some places in the south staying in double figures. Chillier further north across parts of Scotland, could be a touch of frost here first thing on Friday morning. Otherwise though, through the day it is going to be largely cloudy for many of us. There will be further outbreaks of rain, it is going to be blustery at times, and some more snow, perhaps some ice is likely across parts of Scotland too. Some brighter breaks developing in the southwest, and here it's still going to be relatively mild, albeit temperatures a little bit down compared to today. As we look towards Saturday, and it's a wet picture across many northern areas, particularly Scotland, western parts likely to see some heavy rainfall totals building up. A bit more snow around, again bringing the risk of some icy patches too. A drier picture further south, but quite a cloudy one with a few spots of rain possible. That rain then does gradually make its way southwards as we go through Christmas Eve, eventually clearing through as we go into Christmas Day. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's